Hello and welcome to Teacher Talk, the podcast for teachers who are lifers but still want to have a life. This is Jared, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Johanna. Hello, Johanna.
Hi, Jared.
What are we going to talk about today?
How to survive the end of the school year.
How to survive the end of the school year?
Yes, well, really, how to do it well. I feel like everyone can kind of survive it, but how to make sure learning is still happening and that you aren't seeing a ramp up of behaviors and problems. And yeah, the end of the school year is rough.
Oh, so this will be good because then you can take your own advice and then you can have a better end of your school year.
I always have a good end of the school year with kids. It's that I think I'm like a superhuman and that I'm going to get all of the prep work I need done for next school year done at the end of this school year. And that causes me stress.
So step one is try to do too much.
No, that's just my own personal problem. But anyway, this is about all of those positive things that I experience with my students at the end of the school year, helping others to find that.
And that's why you say survive, because of how positive it is?
Okay, it's not survive. What will we call it? How to maintain status quo. Like, that's really it. It's just everyone reaches a point where all of a sudden their classroom slips, and mine tends to be the last day I have students, which is a good time to have it slip, versus like April, which is not a good time to have your classroom slip.
But okay, so you're trying to not have it go off the rails.
Yes.
Until it absolutely has to.
Until it absolutely has to.
Because the natural thing is for the kids to disengage from learning.
And for the parents.
They know they're almost done.
Yep.
You know, we all get it, whether it's senioritis or whatever it is, when the end is in sight.
Yes, I used to call it, when I taught secondary, I used to think the kids got twittipated, like the Bambi reference. Mm-hmm. You know, they all come out and it's springtime and what's happening to all of them and they're twittipated, the owl says. Yeah. I thought it was just like the weather got a little bit nicer and so all of a sudden, like, spring has sprung, metaphorically, and there were just other interests involved. But now that I teach elementary...
Because they're horny.
Yes. Yeah, but now I've learned that
It's really not just that.
I don't know if it's the weather change. I don't know. I've never taught someplace where it gets hotter. I've never taught, like, in the desert where they would go from beautiful weather in the winter to hot and obnoxious weather. So maybe the opposite happens.
Those of you who have, send us emails.
Yes, let us know. Does this happen despite the weather?
Is it just because it's the end of the school year approaching, or is it natural because of the weather?
Yes, I do not know.
What are your theories?
Okay, so let's jump into the fact, though, that this is a real thing, at least for anyone who experiences seasons, but potentially it has nothing to do with the weather, and it's all about the transition from school time to summer break time.
Well, because it happens, like, rolling into whatever we pretend to call Christmas break now, too, right?
It's not as bad.
It's not as bad, but because the break isn't as significant, but there is still an effect there, right?
Well, I think a lot of this is also about the goodbyes. I mean, this is a new teacher the next time you go. So if I taught in a year-round school where they have breaks more often, I am guessing that they still, and I've talked to a few people who say it still exists, that the goodbye element. I'm going to have a new classroom. I'm going to have a new teacher. I'm going to have a new schedule.
So the last break is different for the year-round teachers.
Yeah, they see it as different. The kids are more used to it because they get breaks more often, but there's a big transition.
Because it's an ending.
It's an ending. Mm-hmm.
It's like that closing time song. All right, so everyone's going to have an ending, even if it's not nice weather or they're year-round teachers or it's the traditional summer. For whatever reason, people tend to disengage as the ending is coming.
Yes, they do disengage
And
if
so
the Indian is coming. Mm-hmm.
you have ideas on how to keep them engaged as long as possible?
Yes, I do have ideas. I do have ways I keep my kids engaged.
All right. And is it all about the kids or is it you too?
It could be that the fact that I'm just a goer and I literally, up until the last second of the last moment of the last day, I am always on, which is kind of obnoxious and annoying as a personality trait. It could be that is part of what helps me, but I think these tricks will help a teacher also stay.
But it's mostly about the students?
I think so.
All right, so what are the tricks?
First off, I put a big performance project at the end of the year. And I have that be as much student controlled as possible. This is a naturally occurring concept if you have finals. But I will even put a project before the finals.
Even if you have finals?
Even if I have finals.
Why isn't aren't the finals themselves enough?
Well, our school district believes that the finals still needs to be essentially a test. So for me, I do a performance assessment at the very end. This is a project where they still could engage in teacher feedback, whereas a formative assessment, a student can't get teacher feedback during a summative assessment at the end of the school year.
These are all fancy words. Does everyone know what performance project means, or can you explain it to me?
Okay, so a performance assessment means that the students are doing something. Like old school would be like they give a speech in a speech class.
Sure.
Or if it was a science lab, they are running and executing a lab. In an art class, they are creating a piece of art, going through the artistic process. In a music class, they have a final performance. In an English class, maybe they're being exposed to content and they're having to analyze and create a paper. That would be, but the trick is that they aren't getting any teacher feedback during this assessment. That would make it an assessment. If they got teacher feedback during the process, then it is a performance, like end of year project. So once you incorporate teacher feedback, it can't be an assessment anymore.
And so you want a project.
A project. So you are hunting for things they don't know. You are hunting for anything that might be missing in their understanding so that you can do any reteaching necessary. And so you want this to be as all-inclusive as possible.
And why is this valuable to keeping people on the rails?
Well, it's about giving students as much control and responsibility as possible and about it feeling like a big event as much as possible.
Really reducing it, you're challenging them?
Yeah. So if I taught in an elementary classroom, I would have this be students make a recording of themselves reading at the grade level, at the level that they currently can do independently for their Just Right book. I would have students solving word problems or using actual manipulatives to solve a math problem, and then I would have the student explain their process in a video. And that the report out can be either that they present to the class or it can be that they present to their parents. But I tend to like to incorporate a presentation element as much as possible.
Because it scares them a little bit?
The audience has to be bigger for them to take it seriously because They feel like they just want to phone it in.
Yeah.
And they have to feel like it's all about them. Like, I am on stage, I am the one responsible, I am the one keeping track of the list, and everything should be review. We aren't learning new content, but we are looking for those moments where the kid goes like, they're in a foreign language class, and maybe part of it is that they are giving us, maybe they're reading for a portion of it, maybe they're giving a speech for a portion of it, and when they're writing their speech, they realize they don't quite understand the past tense, or at the high school level, if, they were creating something, they don't quite realize an element that's necessary for creating.
And this fits with your idea that it's really about the end. A lot of what you do in your class as a student is for your teacher, like their feedback or their approval. As you approach the end of your time with that teacher, whatever they think of you doesn't really matter as much anymore, right?
Right.
So like expecting them to sit in rows and stay disciplined while you lecture works in the middle of the year, because if they're bad, then like that the teacher's going to know that the consequences for that will play out over time for a long time. But as the closer and closer you get to the end, making it about whether the teacher is pleased with you or not matters less and less. So giving them the external audience gives a weight to something besides just you as the teacher.
Right. And in an ideal world, I would have the teachers, like if, let's say it was a social studies class, I would have the teachers flip-flopping kids and flip-flopping students so that anyone that had 6-period social studies, it doesn't even have to be the same class, but that you have different groupings of kids and potentially a different teacher listening to the presentation or evaluating the presentation that the student is giving, so that there is an element of new in what's happening. Like, think about a second grade student. They will have a different experience if they have a slightly different collection of kids, and maybe even a third grade teacher is listening to their presentation rather than the classroom teacher. That's a lot harder to create, but that's kind of like the ideal world.
Sure.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a presentation. It can be a portfolio that's put in a book, and then maybe they have to share it with 3 different adults, and the adults have to give a written summary of feedback. But
as long as the audience is external to the classroom that's ending.
Yes. And the project is all inclusive. I mean, we're talking about, if you know your kids are going to start to fall apart and are going to stop learning about, tax time, well, then that means this is when this project starts. If you know you don't have kids falling apart until May 15th, well, that is when this project starts. I mean, it's all about kind of how you know your community, how big and extensive this experience needs to be.
All right. Is that it? Is that all I need?
No. Okay. So, basically the next key is, even if you don't do a big project, ramp it up. Don't ramp it down.
Ramp up, not down.
Yes.
What's that mean?
You need to elevate the expectations. Teachers become slack in what they expect a student to do because they think, oh, there's only 4 more days. There's only 3 more days. You'll hear teachers say things like, well, there's just 9 more days. Well, my word, 9 more educational days is a lot. If we thought about it at any other time in the school year, 9 days is a lot.
Right.
So you never want to start thinking about how many days are left and change. You want to ramp it up. You want to be like, they've had 72 days, 172 days of school. They should be at their optimal performance. Like, think in reverse. Every day should get better as you climb the mountain. It's not like, a lot of people will refer to grades and they'll say, like, it's like standards-based grading. We're all climbing a mountain. Well, if we're all climbing a mountain, there's no like, well, we climb to the mountain and then we climb down a little bit. Right? The mountain climb goes up until the very end.
You do have to climb down when you're done. Like,
yes.
The movie always ends when they get to the top. But
That's true. That's true. But teachers will often end the year whenever their assessments happen. So secondary has a little bit of an advantage because their assessments are at the very end, like the last day. Elementary teachers, it might be 3 weeks before the end of the school year that their final assessment stuff happens. And so then they kind of like ramp it down. Well, that ramp down is what causes your behaviors to ramp up. So you can either choose to ramp up your expectations and not manage behaviors, or you ramp down your expectations, in which case, welcome to Behaviorville.
Population you. Well, it's kind of the teacher doing the same thing as the kid, but in reverse, and that any individual behavior problem no longer matters as much, because whether you fix the kid's behavior or not, it's over in 4 days.
Yes.
But the problem is you're not going to have one isolated behavior problem. Once you start to let the thread go, it's all gonna it's gonna snowball. It's gonna unravel, to mix metaphors. So you have to resist that logical reaction to things and say, if I don't hold the line, I'm going to get routed.
Well, and you don't want the last. I mean, like, you love these kids. Like, these are kids that you have spent more time with than you've probably spent with your family. You don't want the last times being with them negative because you're constantly having to be snarky with them because they're kind of being goobers. You want to be able to have...
Snarky's probably not the right word.
Oh, what's the right word?
I don't know. Strict?
No, you just get annoyed. You're like, seriously, you just fell out of your chair? We don't lean back in our chairs here. Well, the classroom experience slightly changed, and so it didn't feel the same. And so, of course, the kid leaned back in his chair, and then, of course, the kid fell over. Like, but it's like you start to pick at each other, and it's not necessary. So why have it like that? Okay. The last main thing is that I always feel like the school year is like a big circle. So how I am at the start of the school year is how I am at the end of the school year.
What does that mean?
So we're going to get less done. We're going to spend more time reviewing and reteaching the expectations. We're going to not take it personally when kids don't do what we're supposed to. We're going to, like, basically all, you know how I'm like, day 5.
The strategies that you used at the beginning of the school year apply in a lot of ways at the end.
I almost do it in reverse order. Day 5, day 4, day 3, day 2. The way I throw off the wheels on the last day of school. But yeah, like, you reverse the order of, we're still a team. Let's do team building activities. It is going to take us 10 minutes to remember that this is the expectation for how we learn in this classroom instead of 3, like it took us a month ago. And like, everything goes in reverse.
It's like a train. So the stay on track metaphor is really good. I like that metaphor now.
Why? Huh?
Because you're like, at the beginning, you have to do a lot of work to accelerate the train. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of goes in the middle.
Yeah.
And at the end, you have to do a kind of a similar thing to decelerate the train and stop it at the station.
Yes.
And going off the rails is bad.
Yes. And the reason I like a big project is because then you have a reason to communicate home, and then parents have a reason to keep it on track too. Because, like, think about yourself as a parent. Like, we've been slacking on getting our kids to bed on time. Like, our normal 8 o'clock bedtime has slowly turned into 8:30.
Do they still have reading logs? Probably. I don't know.
I called it an independent study project, and I used the word independent study, and the kids had to create like a timeline of what they're going to get done every day. They had to create a project plan. They had to like do all this paperwork, and then they had to have their parents initial different parts of the plan, like a contract. Parents who are not used to finals because, you know, 9th grade student, this was their first exposure maybe, it really caused them to go like, whoa. This is not the time to plan summer vacation, and now my kid's going to be gone for 4 days in April or 3 days in May because no one's learning anymore. It's different.
They're like those animals in that one Nickelodeon show. This is serious.
Yeah, but I mean, if we got...
You're signaling to everyone involved that, hey, we're not just coasting to the end here. This is
the hardest part.
Yeah.
We are entering the hardest part of the school year. And finals at the secondary level kind of naturally do that because it's just in our society.
Right.
But if you don't have exposure to finals, making something like that, it makes your world so much easier.
Got it.
Okay.
That's it then.
That's it.
This is recap.
Recap us.
The end of the year is an ending, and the incentives realign for you and the kids, given that things are going to be over soon. And there's a tendency for things to go off the rails. You don't want that to happen. So you're going to have a big performance project.
Yes.
At the end of the year.
Correct.
So that you can help see what it is that they still need a little nip and tuck on learning, and that you can signal to everyone that the hardest part of the year is now, and they have an external audience for their performance, so that it's not just you that they're trying to impress, because pretty soon you won't matter anymore. Give them as much control over what they're doing in their project as possible. And then for behavior expectations, you ramp up, not down. You don't want to fall into the trap of being like, well, there's just a few more days left, because everything will go bad then. And the school year is like a big circle, and a lot of the techniques that you used at the beginning to not take discipline personally, or to get the kids, maybe do a little less learning and a little more focus on just how the classroom's going to run.
Yeah, because they'll start picking at each other. I mean, at this point, the kids feel very comfortable with each other. Even in a secondary classroom, they start to feel very comfortable with each other, and they start saying and doing things that are more sibling-like responses to a peer than friend-like responses, just to pick. It's just like, I'm bored. I know how to set this kid's buttons off, so I'm going to do it just for entertainment purposes. So like re-practicing and reteaching those, like, we're a team, we work together, this is how we talk to each other. That can be very, very helpful.
All right. Well, thank you, Johanna.
Thank you, Jared.
Johanna, do you get questions from listeners ever?
Yes, we do.
How do those listeners send you questions?
They send us an email.
Where does that email go?
teachertalk4teachers@gmail.com.
But wait, what kind of 4? How do I do 4?
All of the 4s. They can do a number 4. They can write the word FOR, or they can do FOUR, even though that one doesn't quite make sense.
Well, perfect. teachertalk4teachers@gmail.com.
Yes.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you, Jared.
Teacher Talk, the podcast for teachers who are lifers but still want to have a life.